As Western countries look for alternate sources of oil, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has travelled to West Asia as part of his drive to help lessen the West's dependency on Russian oil. Johnson arrived in the United Arab Emirates to secure additional oil flows and increase pressure on Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. Before his trip, Johnson had compared the Russian President Putin to a drug dealer who had managed to hook Western nations on its supply of oil and gas. Listen in.
Vladimir Putin over the last years has been like a pusher, feeding an addiction in Western countries to his hydrocarbons, to his oil and gas. We need to get ourselves off that addiction.
Johnson is due to meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed and Mohammed bin Salman in Abu Dhabi and Riyadh today. The visit to Saudi Arabia is controversial after the country executed 81 people last Saturday and sparked outrage from human rights groups. Johnson's spokesperson insisted that the Prime Minister would raise human rights concerns and would ask Saudi to condemn President Putin over its invasion of Ukraine. Both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have so far avoided taking a position on the war, but Johnson has an uphill task ahead of him. The Prime Minister hopes to persuade Saudi to boost his kingdom's oil production to help lower spiralling oil prices and lower household energy bills. The visit comes after the UK vowed last week to phase out the import of Russian oil by the end of this year. Currently, the country imports 8% of its oil demand from Russia, much less than mainland Europe, which imports 40%. The UAE and Saudi Arabia are now UK's two largest economic partners in the region. Their bilateral trade is worth $15.9 and $13.5 billion respectively. So far, neither Saudi Arabia or the UAE have agreed to increase oil production despite calls from the West to do so. For more details and insights about the British Prime Minister's visit, our correspondent Naomi Chow Smith is now joining us live from London. Naomi, thanks so much for joining us on WION at this hour. As we know, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in the UAE as part of efforts to secure additional oil flows amid the current spiralling energy prices. What more can you tell us about this?
That's right, and there is a lot at stake for this visit by the British Prime Minister to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, as he really seeks to ask these OPEC countries to step up oil production to fill up that stopgap in the Russian energy supplies. Now, for example, if you just consider that Russia produces nearly 10 billion barrels of oil per day, that's a very sizable gap that the West is looking to fill. And the Prime Minister is out there in Saudi Arabia today and in the UAE earlier today to really see if he can convince the leaders of those countries to fill the gap. And there's been reluctance, as you mentioned, from the OPEC plus producing countries to step in really and boost their production, even though places like the UAE do have excess capacity and have the capacity to do that. Right. There are political concerns, there are financial concerns going on here that Boris Johnson will certainly have to convince them.
Absolutely. Now, the other controversy in this visit is that Saudi is yet to declare its stance in this conflict, not to mention the human rights abuse concerns that the UK has flagged recently. So how will that play into the developments going forward at the onset of this visit?
Yes, there's certainly a lot of controversy around the timing of this visit by the British Prime Minister to Saudi Arabia. You know, as you mentioned, just over the weekend, the kingdom carried out one of its largest mass executions in its history, executing about 81 people. Now, this comes at a time of strained Western relations with the kingdom over its human rights record, over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi a few years back, over the war in Yemen. So there's certainly a very delicate balance at play here that the Prime Minister will have to strike, and he's come under fire from critics in the government here, from the opposition. For example, Labour leader Keir Starmer saying it's not really an energy strategy, to use his words, to go from, quote, dictator to dictator, seeking another source of energy. So certainly controversial and a very delicate balance.
Right, just wrapping up our conversation here, Johnson has said, and he's essentially called on the world to wean off Russian oil and gas. But the big question is, can the UK do so?
That is definitely the big question. And as we have seen, efforts from other Western countries, for example, the US, have not succeeded in convincing OPEC countries to really step up production at all. The question is, will Johnson have more success in this way because there's less frosty relationships perhaps between the UK and Saudi Arabia than there is between the United States and Saudi Arabia, where, you know, President Biden did say during his campaign he would treat the kingdom as a pariah state, and he hasn't veered from that. They have yet to have a call, the two leaders of the US and Saudi have yet to have a call to discuss this. So perhaps Boris Johnson will have more success. He is in the region today also to drum up support for investment in British renewable energy. So there are many other factors at play here that might soften the mood.
Right, absolutely. Naomi, thank you so much for all those insights, and thanks for joining us on WION at this hour.